Dear Secretary General, dear ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, I can concur on your introduction. We are very much a neighbor. We are a great company, I believe, relative to wisdom and inspiration. Let's see in the next 30 minutes. We have 30 minutes together, I think 15, 20 minutes of lecture, and then I would be very happy to take your question. 15, 20 minutes for such a subject is extremely challenging. So I will try to focus on the key things that I think we can share together. And I think the first statement is, as Valeo, we are extremely aware, of course, of the great transformation that is ahead of us. We are very much aware that the auto industry accounts for 18% of the CO2 emission worldwide. And that if we are not doing anything, that's going to be plus 60% between 2015 and 2050. So it means it's not possible to do as is, and there is a transformation that is absolutely needed. We are also very much aware that individual mobility has a great future. The solution of the problem is not to reduce individual mobility. When it comes to public transportation, just one number somewhere in Paris, when you extend a subway by 6 kilometers and 4 stations, it's 1.5 billion euro that you have to spend. So it's not possible to extend much further the public transportation, and individual mobility is a fundamental need of people for transportation of goods and for transportation of people. So we are very much aware at Valeo that we will see in the next 15 years a greater transformation of our industry than what we have seen in the last 100 century, let's say since the Ford T was invented in 1908. So we're going to see a great transformation ahead. And that brings my agenda. First, I will tell you a word about Valeo beyond what has already been said by the Secretary General. And I will tell you how much we contribute or we play a role as an auto supplier in this transformation. I will try to explain as well how complex this transformation is going to be in all aspects: supply chain, material, of course, industrial, of course, technology, performance. So this is the most complex time that's going to be in front of us, and it comes with a lot of challenges, and I've selected 5 challenges to share with you. And I will finally call for an efficient cooperation, because as you will see, we're only a part of a much larger ecosystem, and all the players will have to get to the finish line at the same time. So a few words about Valeo. It has already been said, and this is not a lecture about Valeo, but just one point. As the auto industry is accelerating towards electrification and is on the path to autonomy, so is doing Valeo. We are accelerating in electrification, and we are accelerating in what we call ADAS, which is driving assistance technologies. For just a word, where the car will become electric and where the number of accidents and deaths will be decreased significantly. This is why we are, bringing so many innovations in the field. I talked maybe too much about auto industry, auto supplier. This is true, but we see a lot of the individual mobility taking place with a lot of different forms of micro mobility. Basically, what we are working for is not just auto mobility, but mobility on wheels. It means whatever has 2 wheels, like, of course, the bicycles, like, of course, the motorcycles, the scooters, but whatever has 3 wheels, in India, the rickshaws, or the very light urban car to the, of course, buses and robo shuttles and robo taxis. All this is a different mobility than the auto mobility that is of great interest for us. Of course, we would not be credible on our road to electrification if we were not doing ourselves the effort to be compliant and therefore to be carbon neutrality. So we have taken some significant commitment to be carbon neutral by 2050. And as 2050 is, far away, we have taken extremely precise commitments for 2030 that are, of course, validated by SBTi. It means for our plans, for the 184 plants that we have worldwide to reduce our footprint, carbon footprint by 75%, just in a very, as you can see, short period of time. And we are walking the talk. It's efforts year after year to decarbonize not only the car, the industry, but to decarbonize as well our plants and our R&D centers. Sustainable development is at the very heart of what we're doing, but innovation is at the very heart of what we are doing. And, you see it, we are an industrial company, but we are more a tech company, in fact, because we spend 12% of our sales in research and development. And usually 12% is not typical of an industrial company. Usually industrial companies 4 or 5%. 12% is very much in line with numbers that you see in the tech world, with a lot of patents, a lot of invention. It's about looking for performance. It's about looking for cost, I would say affordability as well. We might talk about it during your Q&A, but the electric car is more expensive than a combustion car by far. A B segment car for an IC combustion engine is 1 ton. It weighs 1 ton. The same electric car will weigh 1.5 ton. You guess that when there's more material, there's more cost. This is just physics. So there's an absolute need of the industrial people to bring innovation that will make this car, the electric car, more affordable. And it's part of the innovation. So it's innovation for performance, it's innovation for affordability, and it's as well innovation for availability. And for instance, we are developing a motor with no rare earths, because there might be a question about availability of rare earths down the road. So innovation, not just for performance, innovation for affordability and innovation for availability. So now, what are the 5 challenges I decided to discuss and present to you? I think the first one, the one I want to insist on at first, because I think it's one of the most important, this transformation that is unbelievably complex for our industry, for the car manufacturers, for the auto suppliers, is going to require a tremendous amount of capex, a tremendous amount of investment, a tremendous amount of focus. It means that the regulation, it means that the frame, the regulatory frame has to be stable, has to be consistent, and has to be the more universal as possible, because we cannot spend the money for a technology here and for another technology there. The amount of capex, the amount of focus that we have to have developing this electric car in an affordable way and available way means that we have to have a frame of regulation that's going to be extremely stable, point number 1, and extremely universal worldwide, point number 2. This is our view. And it means, some consequences that I put here on this slide. The second challenge that we have in front of us is to prepare the next generation of innovators. We're talking about war of talents. You have, a lot of articles about it in many newspapers. It's really a fact today. When the world is becoming electric and not just the auto world, it means that the world is in front of a huge amount of capex to spend. The world is going to recapex itself. This is basically what it means in the next 10 to 15 years. And it means as well that these technologies that are going to be needed are going to require a tremendous amount of talent, of expertise in new fields, of course, cybersecurity, of course, software engineers, and of course, specific competence that is power electronic, which, pretty much all the companies are of need today. So that's a great concern that, not only the industrial people will go this way, but as well the universities, but as well, all the training of the world will go the same way, so that we can have the people that we need to make this transformation happen in the next years. The third point, is, of course, each company has to look at its own numbers, and we are looking, as I said, to our own numbers when it comes to the CO2 footprint. But it makes no sense if we are not looking at the entire value chain, if we are not, addressing the CO2 reduction, not just at one point, but everywhere in the value chain. And it's very difficult, because it means that we need to understand exactly how much, when an engineer of Valeo will select, on the drawing, one material versus another one, he needs to understand what is the CO2 footprint of this material versus another one. This is very concrete. We have 22,000 engineers. They are designing product on every day. Which material are they going to choose? And this material is going to use which other material? In other words, we need to have a clear understanding throughout the value chain of the exact CO2 content, pretty much of everything. And that's very difficult. It's difficult for us to count our own numbers. It's difficult for each company to count its own numbers. And it's very difficult to bring this knowledge at the end of the day to the engineers that are making the technical choices. So committing to CO2 reduction across the value chain and making these numbers reliable and making them available for all the people that make design decisions is something that is extremely key, we believe. Securing resource availability in the event of a major crisis. Well, the industry has been under, as you know, a shortage of chips for now 21 months. So I know what I mean when I say that. What you have to have in mind is that the transformation of the industry is going to call not just for different cars, not just for different components from Valeo, but from different chips, power chips. It's going to call for different material. When we look at materials such as cobalt, it means probably times 20 in the next years. When it comes to nickel, it's probably times 30. When it comes to lithium, it's going times 30 as well. Are we, or are the mining companies doing this job of making this material available by multiplied by 20 or multiplied by 30 in the next 10 years? We have learned, what we have learned in the last crisis of the chip is that it takes 4 years for a new chip plant to start producing the first chip. 4 years. And what we know about material is that it takes 10 years for a mine to start producing the first kilogram of any material. And when I say 10, it might be wrong. It's probably more like 10 to 15 years. So is the overall ecosystem in a position today to really predict what's going to happen in 10 years and already to make the investment today that will make the cobalt, the nickel, the lithium, the chips available in the right quantities in 10 years to allow this transformation? And this comes back to the regulation. You can only do that, you can only anticipate as an industrial if you know what's going to happen in 10 years, because that's the time for the industrial people to prepare themselves. And therefore it needs, and it comes back to, it needs a frame, a regulatory frame that is stable and very clear, so that each of the actors of the ecosystem can predict, anticipate, and invest today for the production that will happen 10 or 15 years later. And the last challenge that I wanted to talk about is, we have to have a lot of incentives to go to the electric car meaning that the electric car, because it's going to be more CO2 friendly, the industrial people have to have the benefit of this reduction in their accounting of CO2. So there's a part of this CO2 reduction that needs to be accounted for in the overall equation or accounting that we do of the CO2 effort. Of course, I think it's not only fair but necessary for to motivate each actor to go in this direction. Calling for stronger collaboration, you have understood through what I wanted to say. There's not any actor that can play its own song. We are all part of a much larger ecosystem. And as you have understood, it's not just even an auto industry ecosystem. It goes much beyond. In 10 years, 2035, for the Green Deal to happen, you have to have enough energy. Otherwise, you will not be able to recharge your car. It needs the infrastructure to have the right amount of charging stations on freeways, in the cities. Is it happening now? You have to have the right mining, the right mine open to create and produce the material that are going to be needed. It needs to have the right chips, which are not the same as today, in order to have the availability. So it's going much beyond the car manufacturer. It's going much beyond the auto supplier. It's a full ecosystem that will have to have a stronger collaboration in the years to come in order to accelerate this transition. And I think everybody in the room is absolutely convinced that this transition has to be accelerated. My conclusion is the following. I see this race, which is enthusiastic. We are, very much at Valeo enthusiastic about making this world electric when it comes to individual transportation. I see it as a race, like an athletic track. The Green Deal, or the European Green Deal, is very clear. 2035, there's a milestone. There has to be the OEM, the car manufacturer, making the race. They are in one lane. The auto supplier are in another lane. The utility companies are in a third lane because there's a need to have the energy that will charge or load the car. The freeway operator are in another lane because we need charging stations. The cities are in another lane. The chip manufacturers are in another lane. The mining companies are in another lane. I think all of us, we know at which speed we need to run, and we are running. As far as Valeo, we are running. We'll see whether everybody is on time on the finish line in 2035. I hope so. I expect so. And as far as Valeo, we will be ready on the finish line. So thank you very much for your attention. I think we have time for a few questions. Thank you.